So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel session exploring the path to non-traditional careers for PhDs. My name is Zenia Mohanta, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Kennedy Krieger Institute at the Johns Hopkins University, and I'm thrilled to moderate this session. Please allow me to introduce our distinguished speakers, Drs. Riley Hightower, Matt Humber, and Aaron Dinin. Did I spell them correctly? I hope I pronounced them well. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So Dr. Riley Hightower earned her PhD in 2021 from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She now is an entrepreneur and owns and operates the Lumbar, a craft bar and kitchen in Birmingham, Alabama. Dr. Matt Humber completed his PhD in molecular biology from University of Vienna in 2012. His passion for music and photography led him to a very successful alternate career, first excelling in photography and eventually becoming a mentor and serial entrepreneur. Dr. Humber is currently the CEO of Humber Institute of Purpose-Driven Leadership. Dr. Aaron Dinin is a software engineer holding a PhD in English. He teaches entrepreneurship and social marketing at Duke University. Renowned as the TikTok professor, he is a prominent Medium.com writer on business and entrepreneurship and has great influence and reach. We are excited to hear the stories of these successful transitions from academia to art to mentorship. Welcome, all of you. And I hope the pronouns that I'm using are correct. If you want to correct me at any time, please feel free to do so. I welcome all the attendees as well. And going ahead, we would like to start with the questions. So this is expected to be a very vibrant discussion, and I look forward to a robust participation from our audience too. Please feel free to ask any questions within our chat feature, and I will do my best to incorporate them into our discussion as we go. We will dedicate the last 15 minutes for an open question and answer session, and I'll moderate till then. So let's get started with the most obvious and burning questions. We would like to hear from the panelists about their background and experiences that led them to their amazing accomplishments. What about your childhood, education, and/or experiences that made you want to pursue these unique careers? And what do you think allowed you to make these bold transitions and succeed in them? We'll start with Dr. Hightower.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for being here. It's a real privilege and honor to be here with other colleagues and Zinnia on this call. I guess to start off, I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I grew up there. I went to elementary, middle school, and high school in Albuquerque. And I traveled down to Las Cruces, where I went to New Mexico State to get my bachelor's degree in nursing. I was recruited to New Mexico State for cross country and track, actually. I was kind of a semi-aspiring professional athlete. I was really good in high school. And I got to college and realized everyone was better than me. And at that point, I said, okay, well, I'm still really good at this. And I had some career aspirations of wanting to go into kinesiology and sports medicine because that's what I knew and what I loved. Ended up transitioning into nursing, where I learned that research was a possible option. A lot of nurses don't know that research is something you can do. And I ended up in a couple of programs in undergrad that I was able to do lab research on top of nursing school. So I was kind of investigating two career opportunities at once, graduated with my nursing degree, applied to graduate school. And that was kind of a short version of my stepping stones, but really to get directly at your question, what made me know that I could kind of do this, I never wanted to own a bar restaurant originally, but I definitely think I've always had the tenacity and the grit to do so based on all the things I've wanted to do. And I've been given the ability and opportunities to do throughout my early childhood and young adulthood life.
Amazing. Let's hear from Dr. Matt Humber.
Hey, thank you, Zenia, for the nice introduction. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, I'm from Vienna, Austria, so I think I'm the one who is farthest away from all of you. In Europe. And yeah, so I studied molecular biology. It took me like 9.5 years to get my PhD as well. And what I encountered is like I loved the studying. I hated the PhD, and this might be because the project was really frustrating from the get-go on. And so what I decided is to follow my passion instead. And this at this time when I was like 32 years old, it was music and photography. And I had this crazy idea to become a concert photographer and shoot my favorite youth idols. And so here I was with a camera and becoming an international concert photographer in a couple of years, touring with bands and shooting everyone on the planet in the rock space. And then when my daughter was born, I thought, I want to be at home, want to be a stay-at-home dad. And I started an online project called How to Become a Rockstar Photographer, where I actually shared my journey to become a concert photographer. And I created an ebook, I sold a video course, and per coincidence, it became one of the most influential communities for concert photographers worldwide. I had a podcast with over 100 episodes. I was flying for Instagram to France. I was flying to Saudi Arabia, shooting the biggest bands, whatnot. It was a really exciting time. And then COVID hit, like in 2020, and the music business was dead. And for me, this was like a new opportunity to reinvent myself again. And through some coincidence, I would say, I came into the world of coaching. And I did my certification with the Coactive Training Institute in California. And what this coaching thing opened a door for me that changed my complete life. And what I'm doing right now is helping people who also, are stuck or want to have a different career, but don't know exactly where to go because and we will talk about this later, but it's quite challenging to leave the highway where everything is driving and getting to the little path in the woods that not so many people are walking. So yeah, so that's my short story. And I think what helped me to navigate this is that I learned early from the childhood on that I can trust my intuition. And whenever my intuition spoke to me, it was like, okay, let's try it out. That might be a good idea.
That's amazing. So basically go with the gut.
Go with the gut feeling.
Thank you. Okay, next, going ahead with Dr. Dinan.
Hey there, and thank you everyone for showing up. I guess the question is, how do we get to where we are? I find myself thinking it's because I think I just look terrible on paper or something. Every job I've ever applied to, nobody ever wanted to hire me. And I find that if I submit applications to things, like I just don't get it. So something about how I present myself, I don't know. I'll give you an example. So I'm teaching at Duke now, and it's this wonderful job. But actually, the first job I ever got teaching at Duke was I'd finished my PhD, but I was building startups, and I just really wanted to stay involved in an academic community. I was living in Durham, and so I just hung out at Duke a lot. And I figured eventually someone would let me teach a class if I had the credentials. So maybe someone would let me. And 2 weeks before semester started, the person who runs the Writing 101 program sends me an email. She knew me, and she says "Hey, I need someone to cover a Writing 101. That's the kind of the lowest level class at Duke. Will you do it?" And I said, "Yeah, yes, I'm in. Whatever it is." And so I take it, and I wound up loving it, and I have this great time, and the class was great, and students they wound up writing articles about it in the newspaper. It was a great class. And I was talking to my wife, and I said, I think I want to do this full time. And there's applications to be Writing 101 fellows, every year. And so I decided to apply. It was paid $45,000 a year or something. But I talked to my wife, and that's what I was going to do. I was going to give up my startup, and I was going to start building, being a teacher full time. And so I applied to this program, and they take 5 people a year, and maybe 1,000 people apply. But I've already got the job. I'm doing it better than I'm doing the job successfully. And I applied to this job, and I don't even get a first round. I don't make the first round of the cuts with my application. And for a job that I was already doing well, that I was already succeeding at. And that was kind of this really important moment for me to just realize the world was not made for, I guess, for me to apply for things. And so I just try to create my own opportunities. And I think that's one of the most important things I think, someone, especially in this kind of PhD space can do, right? Like, if you're trying to apply for one of those, there are 1,000 people are applying and only one tenured faculty is going to get it, right? That's not the way to do it. Can you create opportunities for yourself and kind of create your own opportunities? When you do that, kind of sky's the limit, and you kind of create a world for yourself. So that's.
Thank you. So now I'll be asking a few questions from the transition that you have gone through. So I'm sure the audience appreciates the dedication and struggle of graduate school and how it can make you feel like you have no other choice but to follow that path you have started. Pursuing an alternate career seems intimidating at best. All of you have made these transitions and have been immensely successful in these new roles. We would like to understand how you got over the initial intimidation factor and what stabilized your thoughts and emotions in those times. Can you walk us through both the emotional aspects of this decision making as well as the logistics of making a career change after PhD?
I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
So I think that something that has never really held me back a whole bunch is being afraid of intimidation, of me either appearing intimidating, which I don't think I ever have, or being intimidated by others. And I think part of that is just that I've typically been confident in what I know. Now, I'm not confident in things I don't know. I don't try to fake anything, but a lot of times, I mean, I practice and I rehearse and I present and I do a lot to make sure that the things that I am talking about, I know about. And that's kind of made me confident to really move forward and make strides in the areas that I want to. So in this particular case where I went from nursing school to getting a PhD in biomedical neuroscience to now owning a bar restaurant, well, that wasn't really the original plan, of course not. But I was confident in what I did know, and I was able to use those things to make each step of the way. To kind of go along with Erin's story, I failed a class in nursing school and I thought my entire nursing career was over. I failed my entire first semester of grad school. So I came in with a nursing degree and everyone around me had undergrad or master's degrees in biochemistry, chemistry, molecular biology, biomedical science, and I had nursing. So I could save your life. I just didn't really know anything about it. And so I failed my whole first semester. And one of the things I realized was, okay, well, what makes me feel confident? How can I kind of regain this knowledge, or how can I gain this knowledge quickly that everyone around me has that I don't? Well, I can try to make friends in the city of Birmingham, Alabama, where I just moved to and I don't know anyone. Well, how do a lot of people make friends? You go to a bar, you buy them a beer. So I started, buying, kind of trading a 6-pack or a cocktail for some help from students in my classes, from some of my colleagues. And I was able to pass those classes after taking them the second time around. And having confidence in those things that I knew I was good at. I knew I could make some friends. I knew I could buy somebody a 6-pack. That's always a friendly gesture. I was able to lean on that as opposed to leaning on the stuff I didn't know, which was what made me kind of fail these courses. So I've always been confident to lean on the things that I know well, to make that jump, which is sort of where I found camaraderie around a table, talking about experiments. You share a picture of margaritas with some other fellow grad students, and you go back to lab and you try stuff, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you get ideas and you start thinking and you get inspired. So I think that sort of inspiration and that camaraderie is something that I've always kept really close and has helped me kind of propel forward through times when I've been unsure of other things in myself.
Thank you, Dr. Hightower. What about you, Dr. Humber? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so interestingly, what I'm hearing from all of us here is like the common topic of failure. And I think that is something that I also got through, and maybe everyone is going through it. If you go to another profession that you might not know anything about it, like in my case, being a photographer from a PhD perspective, and for me, like it wasn't, and it still is, an emotional roller coaster ride, honestly saying. And I can just speak for myself, but It's like you have this really high, so everything is working and you feel you're on the top of the world, and the next day it's like everything is crashing down and you have the uncertainty and you don't know what's going on. And so what I've learned is, and I think what kept me going is really believe in myself and, you know, trust the universe that everything will figure itself out once you start your journey. And one mantra that I like to teach, or also to repeat to a lot of people, is like, start before you're ready. Because a lot of people, you know, wait for this perfect moment to start, but most likely this perfect moment will never arise. So for me, at least, it always worked when I started already, when I didn't feel really ready to do something, being it a photographer, being it starting an online business, being it mentoring other people and help them to overcome the obstacles. And so this is one thing. And I think the other thing that's really important is like a social network. You hear all these stories from us, but if you don't have someone who is supporting you, being it a partner, being it the parents, being it friends who really mean it to help you out, because you will get a lot of rejection from other people. They might be jealous, you know, they might fear of, or they want maybe to go to another career, but they are afraid and not doing it, and so therefore they are just making your life a little bit more bad. And I can totally relate to all this. So coming from a PhD, you know, my colleagues and my boss, they were all like, what are you doing? You have this prestigious stipend, everything is open, like academia. You know, I was at the Salk Institute also in San Diego and studying there a couple of times. So everything was open, and then it was me with this crazy idea. And I think, you know, you will feel when it's time to go, but there will be a lot of obstacles that you have to deal with.
Thank you, Dr. Humber. And what about you, Dr. Binden?
You know, as I was hearing people talk, I found myself thinking, you know, one of the interesting things about academia is that we're really bad about recognizing our own contradictions. And most people are bad about recognizing contradictions. So I guess I would say academics are no worse than anyone else. And so, you know, there's this kind of these echo chambers within, you know, academia as an industry. And you know, it's kind of funny. I almost feel like a bit of a fraud even on this panel, right? Because I've got that, you know, like I'm a professor at Duke, right? I did the thing that the academics are supposed to do. And therefore, am I really supposed to be on a panel that says, hey, you know, your PhD, you can do lots of other things? Because clearly I didn't go anywhere. Like, here I am. But I guess my approach and maybe the value I can bring here and to answer your question, which is how to do that thing that maybe you want to do, but try to get to it in an untraditional way. And that, I think, is that entrepreneurial mindset. It's, you know, I always go back to the phrase, think outside the box, right? Everyone uses that phrase and they always use it wrong because they think outside the box means creativity. And that's not what it means. The phrase think outside the box comes from it's like this early 20th century brain teaser where there's these like 9 dots in a square, and you have to connect all 9 dots with 4 straight lines, but you can't lift your pencil. And when they draw it, they put a little box around these 9 dots. And the only way to do it is if you draw your lines outside of the box, right? That's it. And nobody can see it because they're kind of trapped by this box that's on the page. And so what think outside the box means, and what an entrepreneurial mindset is, and what, you know, confidence is, and all these things that we're talking about here, is it means, you know, recognizing that most boundaries in life are artificial boundaries. They're established by some person, some thing, some institution that says, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And a lot of those boundaries just trickle down for generations and generations. And academia is one of the, you know, kind of biggest purveyors of these boundaries. You know, think about publishing in academia and tenure. What does it mean to get tenure? Oh, well, you got to publish books and, you know, and articles, and that's how you get tenure. But it's really funny because the history of books and publishing goes back, you know, to the French Enlightenment. And it's the idea that, you know, that thought has value, and how do we get this great knowledge that we're creating in these academic settings into the world? Well, we do it by using the most popular media platforms of the day, which are, you know, books and articles and pamphlets. So that's why you publish. Now, to get tenure, you have to publish those books and articles and pamphlets, but it's a terrible way to get your thoughts into the world, right? You know, you're going to publish an article and 5 people are going to read it. Why wouldn't you put that on TikTok where millions of people could see it if it's really about getting your thoughts in the world? So again, academia is this and everything. It's not just academia, but we create these boxes that just kind of get established by someone else. And so I think that the confidence comes from recognizing, learning to recognize the artificial boundaries that are everywhere. And when you can kind of take yourself outside those artificial boundaries, as soon as you do that, the kind of a world of possibilities opens up for you. So that's usually my recommendation. All this stuff is learn to recognize the artificial boundaries. What are people doing just because that's the way they've always been doing it, and say, well, what if I don't do it that way? And then you'll find something special.
Do you mind if I comment on this, Zinnia, real quick?
Sure, please go ahead.
Aaron's making a point that I like to make a lot, which is a lot of people who go to get their PhD, who are and a lot of people who have their PhD are trained in professionally trying to figure out the world's most complex problems in any way possible. And yet they don't apply that same sort of thinking to themselves. They can take any creative problem-solving solution and apply it to the bench or the clinic or whatever they're doing, but can't figure out how am I supposed to be a tenure track faculty if I don't want a lab? And it's like, what? You just your entire PhD was dedicated to carving out knowledge in this little niche of space that no one in the rest of the world knows, and you are afraid to kind of move outside your own boundaries. So I usually encourage people who have their PhDs or are getting their PhDs to utilize the same type of thinking and creative problem solving that you use every single day that you're professionally trained in on your own sort of life and what you want.
Amazing. So these are some great inputs, right, that we are getting right now, and I believe that all the attendees must be as engrossed and excited to hear all of it from the speakers. So right now, whatever we talked, I understand that okay, networking. All of you talked about how networking has helped in your journey, right? Making friends, talking to them, all the interactions. Did you seek mentors? And if yes, then what was their role through your transition?
Ooh, can I talk about mentors? So this is one of my big but yeah. So the entrepreneurial world is filled with mentors, and and mentors. It turns out finding good mentors is really, really difficult, because most people want to tell you what to do in life, and your best mentors are people who never tell you what to do. And yeah, most people, we want people to please just make the decision for us, but you don't want that. What you want in a mentor is someone who's going to listen and someone who's going to ask you good questions. So yes, absolutely, mentorship is a huge part of whatever you're going to do in life. But please, I realize it's almost contradictory for me to say that. People, good mentors don't tell you what to do, and I'm here telling you what to do. It's Walt Whitman. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. But still, like, can you find, be very careful of someone who's going to say, this is what you should do. Because anyone who says this is what you should do, they just don't have all the data. They don't have all the knowledge. They don't have the information. And so the best a mentor can do is put you in a situation where you feel empowered to make the right decision based on what you know and what you believe. So finding good mentors, very hard. But one of the keys is if someone tells you what to do, run away. But if someone asks you a bunch of questions and encourages you to expand and doesn't tell you what to do, that's someone to glam onto.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Hightower, what do you have to say?
I sort of agree with Aaron that the best mentors are not going to tell you what to do, but people who tell you what to do are super valuable, because it makes you know exactly what you don't want to do at all, or what you shouldn't do. It helps you identify, you know what, that was a bad idea. I am not going to do that. I actually, in this particular industry of food and beverage, so I run a bar restaurant. We have a full kitchen, full service cocktails, spirits, wine, and some of the best mentors that I have found have actually been in people that work in the industry that are not directly in my position. So I don't have any mentors that are also bar owners in town. I have some people that I'm friendly with that I've met over the years, but nobody's really willing to mentor in this arena directly. And some of the best people that I have found are people that work, and you can kind of take this and apply it to your particular situation as necessary. But for example, product reps, there are some reps who come in who are ambassadors for certain brands of spirits or wine or beer. And if you ask them very, you know, in a very trusting way, kind of in a one-on-one, hey, I really want to ask you about this. Yes, I would be willing to buy your product, but what do you see? How do you see that I'm working? You know, as a rep, you go around and you talk to bar owners all over this entire market, this city. How am I doing in comparison to them? Or what are some ways that they've done things that I can be doing better? I ask my reps that all the time because they see everybody in my position across the entire area of our state. And so I lean on people who see other people in my position to kind of help guide me, not necessarily tell me what to do, because I don't think any of us ever take very well to that, but help kind of point out, oh, well, I've seen this technique used by this person, or I know that this bar runs really smoothly because this person kind of delegates their tasks in this way. And so kind of reaching out to mentor, I don't know that that's directly mentorship, but a lot of the things that I've learned, which is mentorship in a way, I guess, is not so much from that like horizontal who's on my level, but just people outside of doing what I do, seeing from the outside who experience what I do from a different perspective can really help guide how you do your job.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Humber, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah. So what Aaron said really resonates with me, and I made the same. I have the same experience. So yeah, there are a lot of people, or mentors, or consultants, or however you want to call them, and they are valuable. You know, we read all their books and stuff. But the main problem is just because Richard Branson has this huge business, and even though he talks about how he did it, he might not have been in the same situation, or you're not in the same situation. You don't know the same people. You don't have the same mindset. You know, there are thousands of factors coming in here. And so I also agree. And this is also what I experienced. I was working since 2 years with different coaches, and the coach is like what Aaron was referring to, like someone who is not really telling you what to do, but more like get your thinking going by asking questions, right? And this is also getting you back in your own responsibility, because it's easy to say, oh, here is ABC, I need to do this, and then everything is working, and then blame the others if it's not working. But if you take your own responsibility and you explore like your being and what you want to achieve, and this is it's only about you, right? You know what you want, and you know what you're here and what your mission is, probably you can figure it out. And then it's, I would say the chances are much higher to be successful or get a fulfilled life than just following blindly some mentors who are saying this worked for me. So I think both are relevant. Reading books and learning is awesome, but there is more to it than just following blindly someone's suggestions.
Thank you. I have so many more questions, and but then I'll take a hold on the questions that I had prepared to ask you, and we will go to the questions that have been asked at the Whova platform. We all have been using it rigorously, and we have quite a few questions there. So I would like to ask those questions to you now. So one of the bursting questions here is that how did you leverage your PhD in spaces that don't know much about the academy? Much about the academia, I think it should have been, but how did you leverage your PhD in spaces that don't know much about the academia? So we'll start with Dr. Humber. What do you have to say about it?
Yeah, so for me, I was totally out of academia, and what my PhD is doing is like, it helps me tell a sexy story, saying bluntly, because it's like, wow, he has a PhD, and then he translated to a different genre or like a different industry, and then again he reinvented himself. So for me, it's more like I use it as a marketing tool, I would say, and so therefore I'm also just put it in Dr. Matt Humber. It's not that I'm proud of the doctor or the PhD, but it's not something I want to, you know, say, oh, I'm so good. It's not about this. It's more like bringing an awareness that I I have it, so to speak. And what I learned from the whole process is like, I think really being persistent, because everyone knows who is doing a PhD or a postdoc, you need persistency. And I learned this, and this really helps me in this entrepreneurial space, because you also need to be persistent there with all your projects.
So next, can we hear from Dr. Dimon?
Yeah, I'd mostly say it's I love that you described it, Matt, as like a kind of a branding tool. It's because I am in the academic space, by the way, like it helps. I can be in the space I'm in because of that. But outside of it, when I was fundraising from venture capitalists, right, it's a good conversation starter is what it is, especially because I was a software engineer who was then thinking about being who had an English PhD, right? It's a fun story to tell, and it gets people to open up. And that's one of the things that if I can encourage anyone to use their PhD for anything outside the academy, stories and conversations. And so one of the default conversations people always ask is, hey, what did you study in school? And you say, oh, my major was X. Well, like if you have the PhD, it's just kind of an even more interesting like story to tell about your major. And yeah, it's great for brandability. And it's kind of weird to say that that's all it's good for, but yeah, I'm gonna just shut up.
I think my input on this is a little bit different in the sense that I did have to fight in this industry that I'm currently in food and beverage and restaurant, because a PhD to anybody that's looking at a restaurant means absolutely nothing. And when I kind of started talking about myself to people and kind of trying to have them take me seriously, which is sort of where the question is getting, is how do you get people to value your PhD who are not in the academic space? You kind of treat it as a resume, right? When you're submitting a resume for a job application, they don't need to know you were a lifeguard when you were 16, unless you're applying for an aquatic center director position. Then it might be relevant for you to add that lifeguard position on your resume, right? So when you're talking to people about a PhD, I usually say if they don't, if those people aren't totally linked into the academic space or even really know what a PhD is, other than it's a really long time of being in school and a lot of hours of doing grunt work, then I usually say something like, yes, biomedical neuroscience might not be relevant to the cocktails that we're making, but I'm an expert in solving every problem that I've ever been presented with. And that usually makes people go, oh, that makes sense. So you're kind of tailoring your experience to who you're talking to and who wants to know in order to get them to understand your value. In the food and beverage space, having a PhD means nothing other than the fact that I was very versed in sleeping next to our freezer that was broken to make sure that the condenser worked all night long, when I've already done that by sleeping next to my cell culture because the incubator was old. And I swear if that thing had gone out overnight when I was home and the alarm had been alarming for hours and I would have lost my entire cell culture of an entire project, I already knew how to sleep on the floor next to something that I needed to make sure worked. So yeah, that's not valuable to a lot of people, but it is incredibly valuable to making sure that this operation continues and making sure that you're sort of marketing yourself in that way to make other people understand your value is an important skill to have. And so I encourage everybody to kind of dig a little bit deeper and figure out, yeah, okay, you're an expert in your project, but what other intangibles have you had and how are those going to be valuable to the other people you encounter outside of academia?
Yeah, and it's to build on it's not that your PhD isn't valuable, right? So hopefully no one thinks I don't think any of us are standing up here and saying that you shouldn't do this, it's not worth your time. It's that recognizing that the value of it comes from kind of these others in unexpected places. I was talking to my friend who he's an MD PhD, and he was submitting a grant to the NIH, and he was complaining about it because he had to have 13 recommendations on this grant, but he only had 12 pages, and so he's like he spent an entire afternoon playing with the margins on this Word document so that everything would fit in the space. And it was kind of like, funny. Remember, when you were in undergrad and you were just trying to cheat your professor to like expand the length of your paper so it fit the page requirement, you're screwing around with margins. It turns out that skill, super valuable in this totally different context. And so that's kind of what, you know, your PhD is. You know, the thing I always tell my students is they always want to know, like, what should I major in? And I always tell them, like, the thing you major in doesn't limit what you're allowed to learn and what you're allowed to know. And so PhD, again, it's a tool to think with. Whatever you're studying, it is a tool to think with. And as long as you take those thinking skills, you can apply them to so many other things. And that's your job. That's the hard part, and it's the fun part.
I think Zinnia's microphone has stopped working, so she called on my help. So hi, everyone. Zinnia, how have you honed your elevator pitch through time? Is that the question that I should be focusing on right now? Okay, so the next question we have from Huva is, how have you honed your elevator pitch through time? I'm not sure what process Zinnia was using or who's answering, or if someone wants to jump in and answer.
I can kind of piggyback off my last answer.
Fantastic.
Is that your elevator pitch needs to be specific to who you're talking to, what you want, and what you want them to know. So just an hour ago, I had a rep in my office and I said, these are the 3 things that can make me buy your product. And this is what you need to know about me. I had 3 things about me, 3 things about what they need to know. And then I got to know them. And that's it. It took 60 seconds. And in terms of how that's evolved, it's always evolved based on who I'm talking to and what value they think that I'm going to bring to the table. And you just tell them that value. You give it to them straight.
Wonderful. Does anyone else want to add to their insights to the elevator pitch question? I'm sorry, I'm totally going off the cuff here.
Thanks, Marta, for stepping in. You know, something that I would just build on here is, it's never about, like, in any sort of conversation, any sort of like delivering value, it's never about you, it's about the other person. And so the key to a good any sort of pitch isn't by focusing on yourself, it's by learning about the other person and then figuring out how you can solve their needs. You know, that's the key to a good salesperson. Everyone thinks a great salesperson is great at talking and chatting. It's actually why I was a terrible salesperson, because I'm really good at talking and listening to myself talk, because that's what academics are good at. We love hearing ourselves talk. And think, and we think we're the smartest people in the room, but that doesn't create value for other people. The thing that creates value is figuring out what they need, and if you ask questions, that's how you get it. And you have to remember that communication isn't, you know, people say, oh, you have to have good communication skills. Everyone thinks good communication is about talking, but remember, communication also involves listening, and so are you good at listening is really more important than are you good at presenting yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I just jump in here what Aaron said. So there's this saying, why do we have 2 ears and 1 mouth? So we should like listen double the time than talking, something like this. So I think that's a good one. Listening what they want to hear. So it's all about them. And sure, you need to provide the values, but it's really specifically tailor-made for the target audience, I would say.
Nice. Thank you. So we'll go ahead with our next question that was asked on the Huva platform. How to overcome the overqualified stigma outside academia when having a PhD?
Overqualified has nothing to do. Overqualified is actually a very subjective term that means nothing. There are people say that I'm overqualified to run a restaurant, and there are people that say you can have a PhD, but you've never run a flat top grill and you've never made 10 Manhattans in a minute. So my PhD holds no value in those realms. So overqualified and underqualified are so subjective, and they're based on whoever is talking down to you, honestly. And I would not put any merit to that. It, again, as we've kind of all emphasized during this panel discussion, it's about how do you find your value and how do you take that and present it in a way to where you can find a good partnership in whatever your next step is. And how do you kind of create a team with whatever that step is? It doesn't need to be a business or a specific person, but whatever you think you want your next step to be, how do you take your value and use it to move forward, while also understanding your limitations, your own limitations.
I've found, you know, the word overqualified tends to be it's a fake word. It's actually, it's misplaced. What people really mean is that you're a flight risk. from like hiring, right? You know, if they look at your resume, what they're saying is, you're clearly not interested in this job. You're just looking for, you're just fishing for something. And as soon as you get a better opportunity, you're going to be gone. And that's actually a big problem for them because they put a lot of resources and effort into hiring you, into training you. And so overqualified usually is just another way of saying you're a flight risk.
And what about you, Dr. Humber? What do you think?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm a little bit special in this way, I think, because I'm in industries, or I was working in industries where this PhD, or yeah, really didn't make any sense for them. Like as a photographer, no one cares about if you have a PhD. Then it comes back to the story. Oh, he has a PhD, but that's cool. So there was no issue. It even helps me because it's like, okay, this guy also has a PhD in molecular biology, so he was a former researcher and he knows about the biology, what he is helping people with. So, you know, honestly saying, for me, overqualified might play a role in, you know, if you go for some specific specific jobs. What I know from colleagues is, you know, they did the PhD and then they went for postdoc and another postdoc, and they found themselves struggling getting a job like in a pharma company, for example, because they were so overqualified. So I don't know if this is the case with PhD as well. The only thing that I know is if you do 2 postdocs, then you might, it might be hard to find a job that fits you because you're way overqualified for a lot of jobs.
Okay. So I think we did not hear from Dr. Dinan about it.
You did. I said overqualified is a.
I'm sorry.
No.
I mean, I'm having 2 screens here, so.
No.
Okay, great. So now we going into the last 5 minutes of our talk. Do we have any questions from the attendees? Okay, so thank you so much for giving us this great insight on the day-to-day happenings of a successful professional career, all your inputs on mentorship and networking. I know that all of you are full of helpful tips for success that our listeners would love to hear. That being said, what advice would you give to someone interested in a career in research beyond academia, but unsure how or where, or even what if to start?
So the question is how to start.
Yes. So what would be your tips to the listeners?
Yeah. Yes. So for me, I think it's a more general question or answer in this way. It's like knowing what you really want. And, you know, yes, you can read what jobs are there and you can make lists and you can like do it from a mental standpoint or place. But what's really important is, I think, to figure out why you're doing it and, you know, who are you, what are here for, and all these questions. So what do you really want in life? And this might be hard questions that most likely we are not asking ourselves. But, you know, if you don't know what you really want, most likely people live lives that are not even for them, but for someone else. So I would say what helped me is start with this inner work, asking those questions like, who am I, what I really want, what is my dream, what is my vision? And going slowly from there, if this makes sense.
And what would be your advice, Dr. Dinan?
I loved Matt's. I think he's there's this I call it having a North Star. It's a lot easier to make decisions in life when you have a North Star, when you can say like, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, and does this thing help me get to it? Yes, no, right? And I find so many people, especially in the entrepreneurial world I work with, it's like, well, what are you trying to accomplish by building this venture? And so, is this decision going to help you get there? If yes, continue. If no, stop, because it's really hard to know when you're going down the wrong path. And so a lot of people just keep kind of going in a direction they shouldn't. So figuring out where to go after your PhD is, really comes to personal decision making. What are you trying to, where do you think you find value in what you're doing? And once you've established that, then it becomes a lot easier to make those choices and find those opportunities.
And Riley, Dr. Hightower.
Yeah, I've got two things. So one is to hold on to the fact that it is okay to change your mind. I think somebody like Aaron seems like you kind of had a North Star. I went from being a kinesiology major to a nurse to a scientist to a food and beverage director and bar restaurant owner. That might seem like a North Star at certain points in my life, but I changed my mind. And it's important to remember that if you change direction and change your mind, you're not a failure, you're not a quitter, you're just changing your mind, and that's okay. And you can kind of move towards this new thing guilt-free in a way that's like, this is what I want to do. And the second thing that I would really recommend is treat everything around you like the experiments that you are professionally trained to do. Again, you have all of these skills that you're professionally trained to do. You will sleep in lab to make sure the dang thing gets done. You will write 140-page grants asking for a little bit of money. You can write a business plan. You can do all of these things. You just have to use the skills you already know to kind of go towards the thing that you're looking for at that time. To treat it like an experiment. You already have the skills. Just do it.
Thank you. So I want to conclude our session by again thanking Drs. Hightower, Hombar, and Dr. Dinin for meeting with us today and providing us such fantastic information and advices. Thank you so much for being here today with us. And thank you all the attendees. And we'll be having our next session, which will be exploring new horizons, my expedition into research beyond academia, and weaving a web of support, my mentorship journey unveiled. So please, I would request the attendees to go ahead and join the other next panel discussions. And thank you again to all the speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
Bye.
us.